So some of the factors to consider when you're authenticating and vetting through some of that data. Consider the formation assignment. So again, XI is doing the best we can to try to establish which formation a gas analysis belongs to. Sometimes it's not quite that easy. Sometimes we have depth intervals that span multiple formations. So which one do we give it to? It's kind of a crapshoot sometimes. Or perhaps there's a pool code that conflicts with what the tops have to say. So we're trying to apply all these different factors when we're assigning gas analyses to formations. We try to be as right as we can, but we can't claim that we're always right. Distance is a factor, so consider that the highest among the 5 closest might be the highest H2S, but is it the most analogous? Consider that. Consider test date. Careful with this. I mean, it doesn't mean that a gas analysis from 1980 isn't relevant, but you may be able to find a more relevant flow rate that reflects today's conditions as opposed to 30 years ago. Sample type. We talk about gas analysis sampling in a little bit as well, but there is a ranking of more reliable gas analysis testing than others, so just keep aware of that as well. But once again, in my, I think I've got it about 3 or 4 times in my notes, cannot stress it enough, you have to explain your work. Once again, this is, as I talk to the ERCB about where their frustrations lie with applicants, one of them is not enough documentation. So if they are discounting a sample point, just remember that they are seeing the exact same sample point. So if they're referencing a gas analysis and you're not showing it, it's not wrong that you're not showing it. You've chosen not to use it, but you have to explain why you're not using it. So documentation is big. The resources that we're providing to facilitate that process, so the browse feature, as I had mentioned before, use that to research and investigate some of these sample points. Assigning a different sample, so you, out of the 10, the one we chose, you disagree and you want to use a different one. Within the report, you can choose a different sample point. The reassign test function, if we've given it to, say, the Jolie Foo, but you've looked at the tops and you feel that this should be a cardium test, you can reassign the test within the report. The engineering geological discussion and the footnotes, these are both areas that we provide for documentation. So on a particular sample, you made a decision, we provide those footnotes for you to document and explain that decision. And in deeper, that engineering discussion, we're providing about, space for about 2-3 paragraphs of discussion right within the report. And data alerts, flags, footnotes, and the info exchange. Those who are familiar with our report will know exactly what I'm talking about. A primary element that we focus on and take a lot of pride in is how we're helping facilitate clients as you are knowingly dealing with problem data. So we know that we can't fix problem data. We don't. Our role is to be a purveyor of public information. If we're getting in there and actually fixing data points, we're overstepping our bounds. And when our data is not reflecting the same data as the board, we can be causing a lot of problems for you. So we'd like to fix it, but we can't. So what can we do instead? Well, at the very least, we can start identifying issues for you. So proactively touching on situations where, okay, clearly there's a problem here, and you guys are going to need to do some research on that. So 2 of the tools that are found within the H2S search, you heard me talking about the footnotes. So not only is the footnotes a tool for you guys to document yourselves and communicate among your peers and the ERCB in your audit package, but it's a tool for us to communicate to you. So when we find a suspicious data point, we will plug a footnote in there just so you're aware, and raising some awareness ahead of time for you. And then as we do a lot of those alerts, we're taking all those findings, ranking them in terms of severity, and we're actually putting them in one sheet called the Alerts tab. So serving it as more of a hub for clients so they're not having to jump to each backup sheet, identify all these different problems. We're actually just holding it all in the Alerts tab in one spot. So for those who may not be familiar, we have this Alerts tab where you can actually jump to there, and every single flag that we have identified you will see there. So it's a quick little tool that you're going to fly through just to say, okay, I'm seeing a lot of non-identified formations, for example. Sorry. Non-identified sample points that I need to deal with, or that I need to jump into the Manville and start dealing with some of those problem data points as well. Some examples of some of the issues that we will identify on your behalf: non-identified sour. So as I say, there's samples that we couldn't assign to a particular formation. There's not enough information. We don't have TOPS, we don't have pool codes. We couldn't give it to a particular formation. We have to blindly give it to this non-identified, kind of the unresolvable bucket. And instead, we do need to convey those to you. If in fact one of those is sour, we're going to let you know right up ahead of time, because you do need to focus on that one. Spans multiple formations, as I described before, a depth interval that goes across different formations. Make sure you're aware of those and you're dealing with them. Suspicious interval. If we've come across a sample where the depth interval doesn't coincide with the completions that had been done on the well, certainly an area of concern, because it's impossible to have taken that gas analysis at said depth. And just a quick note on an info exchange record. So an info exchange record is when a client has previously encountered this same test and they've already done work on this. So they've identified a cardium sour test, they did their analysis and identified that the depth interval was wrong. We hosted the info exchange, started hosting the info exchange about 4 years ago, and it was in response to the industry's frustration, saying there's just too many people dealing with the same data points over and over and over again. Wouldn't it be grand if these could get fixed at the source? Well, that's just not a reality we can expect. So in lieu of that, if people are running into gas analysis, doing the work to discount those, what they're now doing is submitting those to EXI, and we're serving them back to users. So we're creating a bit of a communal forum of data discussion. So if you run into a sample with the footnote IX, that's what's going on there. So. Okay, so still on data sampling and search area. They are addressing trace H2S, which is fantastic. A round of applause to the CAPP guidelines for this. For those who are aware, there's a lot of samples in our public domain that speak to a trace H2S, and in a lot of cases, those trace gas analyses are being identified, and they're causing wells to be licensed as sour when they didn't necessarily need to be. Some of these trace samples are a little bit difficult to discount, so what the CAPP guidelines have done is they've built a little bit of a rule around, if you see a trace H2S, there is an opportunity to drop that out, because it shouldn't necessarily affect your planned H2S release rate. So I've heard of several cases, in fact, where the H2S was recorded as 0.2 ppm, not necessarily because it recorded that much H2S, it's just the testing equipment couldn't test any more sensitive than that. So they couldn't guarantee that it was completely sweet. They just wouldn't have been able to register anything less than that. So sure enough, it gets into the public domain as 0.2 ppm. Very minuscule H2S, but sure enough, as long as it's trace, it's non-zero, so therefore it's now a sour gas analysis. So they've built some guidelines around what can I do if I run into a trace sample point. If these 3 points are satisfied, you can consider dropping out a trace H2S. So if all the samples with H2S show values less than 50 ppm, over 80% of the representative samples are sweet, and the operator does believe that the trace sample is erroneous, you can actually drop that out, according to the CAPP guidelines. So good for them for identifying and addressing this. We as XI have looked at this and said, well, it's fairly visible for us to be able to identify these on your behalf. So maybe after today's session, and if you guys can stick around, we'd love to get you guys' feedback on an idea that we can actually build a feature into that identifies these for you, and leaving it up to you to drop them out on your behalf. Okay, so 3.11, still on data sampling, but they are now talking about more specifically about pools, drilling within a pool that is a known pool or drilling outside of pools, and what are the data sampling requirements. Going forward, I'm not going to actually speak to the guidelines specifically, but just summing them up just in the interest of time. So what they're essentially saying is if you know and can demonstrate that you're penetrating an existing pool, you only have to look at data within that pool. Consider the max H2S, the pool max H2S within. If the data sampling is insufficient within that known pool, however, you should still search beyond the pool for other representative sample points. So I've got a little illustration here showing an example of where we're going to grab the 10 gas analyses and whether or not we're going to be touching on that pool. Again, XI won't know whether or not that pool is the most representative, but leaving it up to you. The 10 gas analyses we found in green here, we found a max of 0.37%. These sample points over here are speaking to the Pekisko A pool, and had we searched the entire Pekisko A, we would have seen this gas analysis up here at a max of 7.23%. So just so you know what we're talking about when we say pool max, this is what we mean. When we reference any sample point that is assigned to a known pool, we are going to pull the pool max and consider it in your H2S release rate assessment. Now, again, it's up to you to establish whether or not Pekisko A is geologically analogous. If you can prove that Pekisko A is not relevant, then that would be your decision, and you can knock out these blue sample points that you see here. Now, drilling outside an existing pool. So if you don't know whether or not you're going to hit a particular pool or not, the guidelines are laying out that you need to start within 5 kilometers and looking for a minimum of 5 tests and 3 reference pools. Consider the pool max if the multiple wells and tests are found within the pool. And just understanding that sometimes relevant data isn't nearby, and if you need to search further, sometimes you have to go fairly far to get something representative. Again, this is how the H2S search is doing it as well. Just another point on how far is too far. There is no rule. It just simply comes down to a judgment call. So a different scenario from what we were talking about in Pekisko. Here we're looking at the Banff formation. We will give you the 10 chosen reference wells for H2S, and these are those 10 chosen wells. It just so happens that we touched on 4 different pools in the Banff: Banff A, Banff C, Banff M, and Banff I. So at this point, now what are we going to do? What XI has done is we've considered every single gas analysis within this 5-kilometer area, and we've given you the 10 worst case scenarios. Not really focusing on any particular pool, but we have identified 4 different pools just in that search. In a situation like this, I would definitely suggest that you expand your search criteria and bring in as much data as you can, because clearly 10 wells is probably not going to represent that sampling well enough. Section 3.2 on data sampling. Not a lot I'm going to speak to here. We're using already sampled data, so not a lot to focus on, but just a couple of points that after you have drilled your well, you've tested the well, if, for example, you had previously licensed your well as a level 2 designation, you've tested it and you have clarified that actually you should be a level 1, you can repost that license with the ERCB and update your well as a level 1. And in this section, there's also some verbiage around the ranking of what is considered a highly reliable test versus the less reliable gas testing.